Okay, so the equipment in front of you, basically we've got a modified BRW head ring. Now, what do we mean by modified? Well, if you take a standard BRW head ring, the top part is very accurate. So you've got those little 3 holes where the localizer fits in on the top, and they're very finely machined so that you can reliably scan the patient, do a CT scan, and the coordinates, unless the ring has been dropped or the localizer has been warped, will be correct within a half a millimeter. The bottom part of the ring, though, if you look at that, there's a spot where the 2 screws fit in on the bottom, and those screws couple the ring to the operating room table, okay, when we're doing a biopsy or DBS, but more importantly, for radiosurgery, we're using it to couple the ring to the XYZ floor stand that positions the patient for a radiation isocenter. So the bottom of the ring has to be remachined so that you get it from the manufacturer. The screws are wobbly. It's maybe will be accurate to 5 millimeters, which makes no difference if all you're using it for is to connect it to the Mayfield on the OR table. But if you're using it to position the patient for radiation, that has to be remachined to be very accurate. Then we've got carbon fiber posts. The carbon fiber posts extend from the head ring up, and they're made out of carbon fiber, so you can do a CT scan through them and it won't create any artifact, just like the carbon fiber tables on the CT scanners. And then we've got plastic pins that go through the top of the carbon fiber posts with aluminum tips. Now, we used to have steel-tipped pins, and they're nice because the steel is harder than aluminum, so they last forever, but they create a lot of artifact. So all the pins now in our system are aluminum tipped. We do reuse them, but because they're aluminum, they will wear out and need to be replaced. They're not, the manufacturer will sell them to you as a one-time use, but we probably use them 50 times, and sterilize them before they have to be replaced. So you're all familiar with these pins. Now, they come in 2 sizes. There are short pins and there are long pins. Now, if you put 4 long pins on a normal adult head application, you will not be able to fit the CT localizer over the outer circumference encompassing those 4 long pins. So you'll put the pins on, the patient will go down to the scanner, and you'll get a call from somebody, maybe the CT techs, telling you that you can't get the localizer on to do the scan, and you'll have to go down and replace the pin, which is not a good idea. So for the typical adult head ring application, we're going to use 2 short pins, just arbitrarily. We typically put the short pins in front and 2 long pins, and you won't have a problem with that unless you're dealing with a very large adult head, okay? So if you have to screw the post drives all the way out to where they touch the head ring, open them up all the way in order to fit the ring down over the adult head, that's a large head, and you'll need to use 4 short pins. Otherwise, you'll run into the same problem with the localizer. And there are a couple of other variations that we'll talk about. So here is the head ring. This is the top side of the head ring. It seems to be very confusing to figure out what's the front and what's the back of the head ring. So the front of the head ring has the 2 holes. The back of the head ring has the rectangular excrescence here with 1 hole in it. Okay, anterior is here, posterior is here. The post drives, you're going to have to fit into the ring. You'll screw those into the ring, 4 of them, and they have to be right side up, so the carbon fiber post will be projecting upward. And then the plastic pins go through these holes. Now, the bottom of the ring, this is what I was talking about before. This is the part where you have to remachine the ring for radiosurgical application. So you can buy the remachined ring from your radiosurgery machine company for $10,000, or you can talk to Frank and he can make you one for $500 down in the machine shop. And he can also give it to you in any color. So a lot of you have got orange or blue rings rings instead of the traditionally manufactured silver anodized rings. All right, so the basic technique is we typically, for radiosurgery, the patients show up at 6:30. We give them 10 milligrams of PO Valium, and then about 30 minutes later, we get ready to do the head ring application. You don't have to do any shaving, no shaving required, and no prepping is required. Okay, we've never had an infection from putting a head ring on unprepped, unshaved. Okay. The easiest way to do this is to have two people. You can get the patient to help you, and you can do it with one person. I've done that, but if you have one person who sits behind the patient or stands behind the patient to stabilize the ring, then the guy who's putting the ring on puts the ring over the head, and we'll demonstrate this to you, and then drives the post drives in until the tops of the post drives are touching the scalp, so that the ring is just about exactly where you want it, and it almost will hold itself in place because you've adjusted the diameter of the ring. Then you inject the local anesthetic through the post hole. I've seen people inject it around the post hole. I don't have no idea why you would do that, but there's a hole there at the top of the carbon fiber post. That's where the needle goes, right in the middle of the hole, and you inject that until you get a sizable wheel of local anesthetic. Now, for radiosurgery, we tend to use half lidocaine and half marcaine, so you get immediate onset. For a biopsy, you get immediate onset, but it lasts 8 hours, and so that's necessary if you're going to have the ring on all day. If you're just going to have the ring on for an hour or two to do a biopsy, lidocaine is okay. A big mistake that people tend to make is to inject marcaine alone, and then 30 seconds later put the pin in. Marcaine takes a long time to set up and to produce anesthesia, so it's okay to use alone in the OR when the patient's under general anesthesia, and you just want to give them a little bit of. You're using marcaine with epinephrine for skin hemostasis and maybe for a little post-op pain relief, but that's the only time you should use marcaine alone. You don't want to use marcaine alone for head ring application. Pin application, the pins just screw and through the top of the post, and you want them to sort of be tight, using your thumb and your first finger, tight, that tight. So this is the typical position. You can see this is Frank. He's behind the patient. His hands are resting on the patient's shoulders. So if the patient moves the shoulders, which they may do when you inject the local, because that's the part that hurts, he can respond to that. The front posts this is as high as you want them. You would never put them higher than this. You can put them lower, all the way down to the orbital ridge, and they should be approximately in the mid-pupillary line. The back posts, you want the ring to be tilted with the front of the ring higher than the back of the ring, and if you can get the hair out of the way, you want the top of the ring to be below the external auditory canal. If the top of the ring is below the external auditory canal, you won't be able to image the entire head, including the posterior fossa. If it's not, you're going to do a scan. You're going to find out that you can't see the acoustic that you're trying to treat, and you'll have to go back and reapply the head ring, which will not make the patient happy. All right, so here's a patient with again, you want these posts in approximately the mid-pupillary line, several centimeters above the eyebrow. And now we're taking the marcaine and lidocaine, and we're creating a wheel about that big. And this is the part where you need to talk the patient through it, because this stuff burns, and they're not, it's normal to equate burning with something going wrong. to get away from it. So you need to tell the patient you're going to feel a needle stick and it's going to burn. It's not doing any damage. Just give it a minute and it'll be numb. And you can talk most patients through this pretty easily. Now, there's a wide range of response to painful stimuli, but we've never been unable to apply a head ring in an adult patient with anything other than local anesthesia. Okay. You might run into that sort of Vasquez Hispanica hysterica kind of thing, but that can be a problem. All right, here's another patient, and again, that you want the pins to be in the mid-pupillary line, a couple of centimeters above the eyebrow. And here the short pins are going in the front, and using 2 fingers, I'm tightening that until it's as tight as I can get it with 2 fingers. Notice that the front part of the ring is higher than the back part of the ring. If the back part of the ring is too high, the front part of the ring is going to hit the nose. Okay? And we see this. Okay. And again, the top of the ring should be below the external auditory canal. All right, and here we go again. A centimeter or 2 above the eyebrow, approximately in the mid-pupillary plane. Notice that the ring is well below the external auditory canal. And in the back, it's off midline by 4 or 5 centimeters on each side would be a typical occipital burr hole kind of spot for the posterior part. If you're trying to do a posterior fossa biopsy, which we don't do very often, then you really have to concentrate on getting the ring even lower so that you can make that upward trajectory possible, but that's not needed for radiosurgery. All right. So if you put the ring on too low, you won't image the top of the head. Okay, and while you're learning to put a head ring on, it's good to have the localizer there. So you position the ring, and then you take the localizer and you check to make sure that the localizer is not below the top of the head until you get used to that. Okay, it's not a big deal for radiosurgery if you miss a little bit of the top of the head, unless the lesion is at the top of the head. What you'll do is you'll wind up missing a centimeter or 2 of scalp, skull, and brain that the beam passes through, and so you may get a very, very minor error on the dose calculation. All right, failure to image the target. I mean, obviously, again, you can't have it too low and you can't have it too high. You got to know where the target is. We always review. If you're down there for radiosurgery, you'll see us look at a printout of where the target is right before we put the head ring on. Just like in the OR, we look at the images before we put the head holder on. Pin artifact, again, you don't want to avoid steel tip pins. I'll show you that in a minute. The large head, I talked about that. If you've got to screw the post drives all the way out so that you've got the ring at its maximum diameter, it's a large head, and you're going to need to use 4 pins. And you may also need to make some adjustments in where the posts are. If the posts are in their normal location, 2 here and 2 back here, then your maximum diameter is from front to back, and your minimum diameter is from side to side. The head is longer from front to back in a Caucasian than it is from side to side. So if you cannot if the head is too large for that, then you need to move the front post farther back and the back post farther forward, so you're getting to the minor diameter of the head instead of the major diameter of the head. Ah, yes, Dr. Lawson. Prior craniotomy or a shunt, you got to watch out for that, and that's a big deal for radiosurgery. A lot of our patients have had a prior craniotomy or they have a shunt, and if you screw this down over a prior craniotomy, you might get away with it, but you might cause a depressed skull fracture, and that really will ruin your day. Yeah, and obviously, if you screw this into a shunt, you're in for a shunt replacement. So you need to know the patient, you need to know the imaging, and you need to work together as a team to remind each other you need to move the posts around away from their standard locations to avoid prior craniotomies and shunts. Okay, so here's what I was talking about before. You can take the CT localizer before you put the pins in, before you've got the thing nailed down, and you can check to make sure that you're not missing, that this ring is too low. Okay, you see I've got the top of the ring. It's not just below the EAC, it's below the bottom of the external ear. So I can now adjust it up a little bit so I not only can image the whole head, but I'm not chopping off the top of the head. And I would recommend that you do that until you get accustomed to putting the ring on. Okay, and so here's a particularly low ring application, and I've done that because we're doing a posterior fossa lesion. All right, here's what it looks like. This is from the old days when we had steel tip pins, and the trick back then was to put the head ring on so that the plane of the pins did not correspond to the plane of the tumor, because if it did, you weren't going to see the tumor. And you don't need to worry about that anymore because we've got the aluminum. And here is another trick. This patient had a big right frontal craniotomy, and that went all the way down to the orbital rim. So there wasn't a way for me to put the post and the pin on in the right frontal region, and so we just do a 3-post, 3-pin application. You can do that. That's stable. That's what it looks like from the front. She's just got 3 posts and pins instead of 4 to avoid that craniotomy problem. Okay, and then here's one more pitfall. This patient has a very sloping forehead. He's got a very prominent brow, and then the forehead slopes back. And so when I get the posts on, you can see the posts actually hit the eyebrow, and the post hole is not against the skin. That's unusual, but I'd say we see that maybe 1 out of 15 to 20 ring applications. So in this case, you just drive the post until it touches the eyebrow, and then use the long pins in front, and the short pins in back. All right, now I'm going to try to play a movie for you. How do we get to that escape here?